Together to End Homelessness series, Ending Family Homelessness, the Systems Approach and the Role of Philanthropy. This series of recorded presentations focuses on family homelessness, what we know about effective strategies and systemic approaches to ending it, and especially the key roles of philanthropy in supporting the systems approaches needed to make progress. This presentation is the first in the series that Funders Together will present over the next several months. Rather than setting a specific time members need to tune in to participate, we have developed this series so that interested parties can listen whenever it works for them and go at their own pace through the content. Each presentation has an accompanying written brief with greater detail and references. You can find the brief on our website. We want your feedback and any questions you may have so we can continue the conversation and produce additional materials to assist you. Send questions to alexis@funderstogether.org. We'll follow up on what we hear and post some of your questions to the page as well. This presentation is an introduction to the topic and explores how communities need to move the response to family homelessness from one of separate programs working on their own to that of a system working together to address the problem. Let's start with an overview on family homelessness and where we are as a country. Over the last 4 years, family homelessness has come down about 9% at a point in time, which is encouraging news. We have learned that even with rising poverty and increased housing costs, we can reduce homelessness among families with successful strategies and approaches. In 2013, just over 222,000 people in families were homeless on a night in January. That's about 71,000 family households. But while we are seeing progress nationally, we have to do more. To reach the national goal effectively ending family homelessness by 2020, we have to bend that curve. We have to move efforts to implement effective program models in systems that meet the needs of families experiencing homelessness. Over the course of a year, there are many more families that experience homelessness. National reporting shows more than 500,000 people in more than 160,000 families use shelter in federal fiscal year 2012. Most families who lose housing are homeless for a fairly short period of time. In this picture, you will see that every state in the Union reports some family homelessness. The good news is that in the past few years, most states have seen family homelessness decrease, but 17 states reported an increase between 2012 and 2013. Lots of factors figure into family homelessness, and in many cases we can't ascribe the loss of housing to only one thing. This is a graphic from the Houston Coalition to End Homelessness that demonstrates what their local research identified as the primary contributing factors for homelessness in their area. Families that experience homelessness are diverse in their life experiences, but they have a few things in common. They are usually extremely low income. They are typically facing a crisis or the climax of a series of crises such as job loss, domestic violence, or family dissolution. They are frequently headed by a single parent, usually a mother. And homeless mothers tend to be younger, and children also tend to be younger than the typical low-income family. It's hard to predict which low-income families will become homeless, so many of the factors associated with losing housing can also occur for low-income families that don't experience homelessness. As we know, there are a lot of people living in poverty in this country, nearly 50 million. It's estimated that between 5 and 10% of these households experience an episode of homelessness in a year. However, most do not. Because the factors and crises that can lead to family homelessness continue, we do not expect that ending homelessness means no family will ever lose housing again. Instead, the U.S. Interagency Council on Homelessness has set a goal that ending family homelessness means that no family will be without shelter, and family homelessness will be a rare and brief occurrence, a crisis that has an appropriately developed system to respond to it quickly and effectively. In the Hearth Act, the goal is that people return to housing within 30 days. So how has family homelessness been addressed? Well, historically, the response to modern homelessness grew up piecemeal. Programs such as shelters and transitional housing were started separately by organizations and associations motivated to help families in need in their community. As more programs were developed, they did so pretty much in isolation, each deciding their own target population, their own rules, and making decisions about what they would offer to families. And each one had its own definition of what success means. Each of these programs is helping some families experiencing homelessness. But how do we know that the needs of all families experiencing homelessness are being considered? And how do the families who need assistance reach the right programs to help them? Are families being turned away from programs because they don't meet their eligibility? How can we know we are using resources the best way we can to meet the array of needs for families? And how do we know what kinds of results we are getting if everyone is measuring differently? When we don't have a systemic approach to the issues, a number of problems occur that make it hard to make progress. First of all, if there's no system, the burden falls on families in crisis to find the help they need. In many communities, a family may need to call dozens of programs and shelters before getting help, or may not know how to seek the assistance they need. Also, without a coordinated system, resources are less likely to be well targeted. A community may need temporary rental assistance programs for families, but the resources are primarily in transitional housing. Or it may need shelter for families that have multiple barriers to housing, but there may be no programs willing to accept them. In a coordinated system, these gaps can be identified and reallocation of resources can occur. Finally, without a systems approach, there is no way to consistently measure outcomes or know if the community is successfully addressing the problem. As David Peter Stroh said in our webinar about systems change a few months ago, maximizing the parts of the system is not the same as maximizing the system. If one program has great outcomes but is using a disproportionate amount of the resources, or that program is refusing to serve certain families, then the system is failing. A systems response to family homelessness has some key elements. First of all, there has to be a way for the families in need to access help. This is called coordinated entry and assessment. This is the way that families are assisted with where to go, and a common assessment tool is used so that the families are treated fairly and offered assistance in a consistent way. More information about coordinated assessment can be found in our series of Hearth Briefs. Secondly, there is a set of responses and interventions that help people stay in housing or get back into housing as quickly as possible. Thirdly, the crisis response system is connected to other systems that serve low-income families, like child care, education, employment, and health care. Since homeless families are primarily low-income families facing a housing crisis, connecting them to the mainstream service they need, rather than providing these services within the crisis response system, is critical to targeting scarce housing resources and helping families transition back to the community. Like all systems, this system needs clear goals and a way to measure them. Finally, to be a system means there is a way to use the information and resources to meet the goals. Oversight and mutual accountability between programs and funders is critical to make sure that when there is a mismatch between the need and the programs to meet it, changes are made and results are measured. This is a flow diagram of such a system from the U.S. Interagency Council's recent publication, Family Connection. In this diagram, we can see the different parts of a crisis response system and that families leave it at different times, some with very little assistance and some with more. In future briefing videos, we will include more information on specific components, such as rapid rehousing and philanthropy's role. But for now, let's look more closely at how this kind of system works. So what does a family crisis response system look like? In this system, all families who are experiencing homelessness enter through a single or coordinated entry point for assessment and assistance to get to the right intervention. That is, the one that can appropriately resolve their housing crisis with the least time and resources. The objective of every part of the system is to get families to permanent housing. Some families that are seeking help can be assisted to remain in housing or gain housing without needing to enter shelter. This is called diversion, as it diverts the family from entering the homeless services and assists them to enter or remain in housing in the community. This can be appropriate for families who are not on the streets or other places not meant for human habitation, and also are not in dangerous situations such as those of domestic violence. Families that can be diverted will be helped, sometimes with financial resources, but often just with assistance negotiating their situation or with connections to other services. Families that have nowhere safe or appropriate that they can stay may need shelter or interim housing. The coordinated entry system identifies a suitable shelter and, if possible, directly reserves them a place. From there, they may begin to receive assistance to regain permanent housing. Many families can and will leave shelter relatively quickly, sometimes with no assistance at all, or with only information about where they can find housing and links to other services. Other families may need financial assistance to obtain housing, things like deposits, a few months' rent, or a longer subsidy, while other resources are secured. This kind of program is called rapid rehousing. All families could probably benefit from, and some families may require, ongoing assistance to secure and retain housing. Permanent subsidies are more costly and in short supply, but if well targeted as part of the broader system, ongoing subsidies can be used to end family homelessness for those with the greatest income barriers. And for a small number of families that have both income barriers and other significant challenges such as mental health disabilities, histories of substance abuse, and past difficulty remaining housed, well-targeted supportive housing with services may be the answer. In some cases, this determination may be made after shelter or rapid rehousing has been tried. But when available and well-targeted, some families may be offered permanent supportive housing immediately from coordinated entry. The diagram shows the system elements and the pathways to housing for families. Remember that in addition to the infrastructure, a system also needs overarching goals and commitments to accountability. Otherwise, it cannot know if it's successful. Goals should be clearly stated and measurable. Important ones from the Hearth Act include reducing homelessness, shortening the time it lasts, and ensuring that people who leave for housing don't return to homelessness. Those goals need to be tracked by knowing the system outcomes. Those outcomes are for both the system as a whole and the parts. Not every program would be expected to achieve the same outcomes, but each one should have its own targets and accountability. Resources need to be allocated to support the goals, including reallocating from current uses if these are not achieving the outcomes. And a strong system has consistent communication about its purpose, measurements, achievements, and failings to the parts of the system, so everyone knows what's expected and is on the same page. What is the role of philanthropy in changing the response to family homelessness from a programmatic approach to a systemic approach? Funders often see themselves as being outside of the system because they aren't operating programs or serving clients directly. But funders are an essential part of the system. If funders don't understand the structures and embrace the goals and how to track them, then the system can't work. Funders have to use their influence and their resources in support of the system model. Here at Funders Together, we have identified 4 key roles that philanthropy can play. First, as a leader and convener, philanthropy can provide significant support to the systems approach. We can convene community leaders, public and private, providers and others to generate the vision and reach agreements. As parties that are often seen as more neutral, we can also speak what is often unspoken, the importance of looking at the real costs of our current efforts and programs, for example, or how program turf conflicts can prevent collaboration from being successful. In many of the communities we work in now, our members have been instrumental in bringing parties to the table that were not previously working together and forging commitments to a systems approach. Funders can also help with the movement to being more data-driven and outcome-oriented. We can help build the knowledge of the community and develop capacity within organizations and across the system as a whole. Several of our members are supporting capacity building initiatives such as improving the data analytic functions of the system or helping to train providers in the best methods of rapid rehousing. Of course, as funders, one of our primary roles is as investors. Systems change and collaboration requires resources, and often our investments can provide the initial seed money needed to support the infrastructure. But we are also usually invested in programs and agencies. By making our investments consistent with the system vision, goals, and accountability, we can help drive change. And likewise, if our investments are inconsistent with the system vision, we will hold back change. Finally, we can be advocates for awareness, for change, for resources. Although as funders we are limited in terms of direct lobbying, we can affect public opinion and those of leaders and stakeholders at the local, state, and national levels. We can also invest in the advocacy efforts of other organizations. In summary, ending family homelessness is possible. The federal vision of no unsheltered families and rapid returns to housing for all who need it is achievable with a systemic approach to the issue in every community. Each lost system needs clear goals and accountability for outcomes, and a willingness to invest the whole system resources in reaching the goals. As funders, we can support the change through our leadership and ability to convene parties to work together, building the knowledge base and capacity of organizations and systems, by investing our resources in line with system goals, and by doing advocacy to build the systems that can end family homelessness. For more information on this topic, read the accompanying brief and other materials on our website. We also recommend the U.S. Interagency Council's Family Connection and many briefs and analyses of the National Alliance to End Homelessness. Stay tuned for more in our series on family homelessness, the systems approach, and the role of philanthropy. Future presentations will explore in more depth philanthropy's role in ending family homelessness. Look for our announcement and link in July. If you have questions or comments about this presentation or would like to suggest topics for future presentations, please email us at alexis@funderstogether.org. Thank you for your attention and for your commitment to working together to end family homelessness.